You're live now.
Yay. Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. Welcome everybody. Boy, can't believe it. We've hit almost the end of the road here at the Bay Area Craft Week pilot project from the American Craft Council. And I'm so glad to see so many people joining us for this call. Welcome. My name is Scott Pollack. I'm the Senior Director of Programs and Public Engagement at the Council. I'm joined today by my amazing colleague, Lindsay Noble, our Engagement Manager, who's here on the phone or on the line with us or in the Zoom call with us. And of course, the amazing Avery Williamson from, and I'm just so excited. This is such a good project. You've done so much good work on your website. A is for Avery. If you haven't seen her collection yet, please do so. I believe there's only a few limited pieces left. So that's just a little pregame for anybody who's trying to join and shop yet today with us. But overall, again, I'm just super happy to have you join us, Avery, today. A couple reminders for everybody as we're going to spend the next 60 minutes kind of hearing from you and your work and seeing your process a little bit, which I'm pretty excited about. I love your little widget you got. You're going to be able to flash some of the work that we're doing, I think. Anyhow, if people want to follow along with Avery, and the best way to do that is to scroll your little mouse over her screen. You'll see 3 little dots pop up in the upper right-hand corner. And if you click onto those, you'll see pin her video and you can follow along, which seems really cool. She'll be in sharp focus there. The other thing that we're welcoming too is people who have questions or comments, feel free to put those into the chat room. And then between Lindsay and I, maybe Avery, you might have an eye on that, but we'll try to fold those into our conversation as we go for the next 60 minutes. And of course, both questions and comments are welcome. You know, we're seeing a lot of love out there from audience and participants. So I always appreciate that. And I think the artists appreciate that. And we'll try to feed that to you as much as possible, Avery, because you deserve it. It's been amazing to watch and get to know your work. So one way to start is, again, I mean, really indebted to having this opportunity to meet you by way of our 2 curatorial co-hosts for the Bay Area Craft Week, especially that Morgan H. Walker, who was able to introduce us to your work. This is your first American Craft Council Marketplace project, I believe, and hopefully not your last. Really excited and again, indebted to Morgan for this bridge to you and your world. So really appreciate that. And as well as Corey Pemberton. I'll go ahead and put a little link into the chat room that sort of speaks to or demonstrates who our 2 curatorial partners were. But Avery, really excited. I mean, I think we're, of course, both excited and saddened by the fact that we had to get to this point and to go through this much work to recognize that there are so many other Black and Brown voices that we want to have included in our marketplace work. And I know that the world, including ACC, is a lot of work to go to get there, but we're really excited about what we're seeing and what we're doing and the intentional efforts to fold those narratives in. So thank you very much. Let's see, I also wanted to just remind people, and then I'll get out of the way here, that if you do want to post anything online, we do have a hashtag SFBA Craft Week. I'll put that in the chat room if you want to use that to follow along or post or comment. That'd be super lovely. I know that our marketing team would love to put those up and onto the Craft Week site, which only lives for like another, oh my gosh, I'm looking at it right now, I think like 6, 7, almost 8 hours, right? We will close the marketplace down, still a chance for you to visit. You can mine all those artist playlists. You can check out like all the street scenes. I think there's been a lot of intentional efforts to be more inclusive in narratives and how we're talking about craft coming out of those. I was really excited to see that work. So the site is live right until midnight Pacific time. So everybody who's like broadcasting in, feel free to check that out. And then we'll continue to stay in touch post Craft Week. But anyhow, that's a lot of talk from me. Lindsay Noble, do you want to go ahead and have that honor to introduce Avery and kick this thing off? Thanks for doing this.
Sure. And just want to say welcome to everyone. We're super excited to introduce Avery as our last Maker Meetup host. So she's, I think that eighth Maker Meetup host. And we're so grateful to have you here, Avery. Just a little bit about her. She's a Michigan-based multidisciplinary artist whose work explores historical and contemporary notions of the archive, Black pleasure, and spatio-temporal collapse. Her body of work includes weaving, photography, jewelry, painting, and drawing. Through these media, she explores the narratives of Black women in personal and institutional archives. Like Scott mentioned, Avery is featured as in our in Crafts Week new artist collection. And again, like he said, we're super grateful to Morgan Walker, our Craft Week curatorial partner, for introducing us to her and all the other artists that she invited into the show as well. With that, Avery, your work is beautiful. And in fact, we noticed that many of the pieces, I think, either they all already sold out and you've already repopulated your site, but you're very close to selling out. So congratulations. And with that, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm so excited to be here. And I'm so grateful that people are joining on a Sunday afternoon or evening, depending on your time zone. I know it's kind of like a sacred day for relaxation. So I'm really hoping that kind of my chat and my demo will like bring some balance and help you kind of wrap up a week. But it has just been so awesome to be here and to be included in this really wonderful collection of artists. So I make a lot of different types of work. If you aren't familiar, weaving is just like one facet of what I do. I would say that I'm a person who is interested in many things and kind of like hops around and really explores everything. But I'm here in my studio in Ypsilanti, which is near Ann Arbor, which is where I live. And it is full of a lot of things. It is a little messy. So I'll just do like a little quick show of kind of like some of the stuff that's around here. I've got behind me some weavings that are representative of the work that is in the marketplace. This one is a nice lavender purple weaving that's still available. And this is a painting of a new style I've been working on. And I also say I'm pretty into my faux plants in the studio. So that's kind of a big part of setting the vibe.
Avery, was that faux you said? Those are faux plants?
Faux, yes.
Yeah,
In my house, I have real plants. In my studio, I have my not as real plants, but they're still beautiful and fun. So I've kind of set up a little workspace, and I was hoping that I would kind of like share a little bit of what's in the marketplace now, and then also give you all a little bit of like demo and info about starting your own weaving practice. And I would just say, like, in these times where we're in our homes and we're, you know, separated from our friends and family, I think having a creative practice can be so grounding. And I always encourage people to focus not on mastery, but just the experience of working with materials, the practice of creating something, of like letting go of expectations, I think is super important. So I just want to say that, like, I am all about exploration and I encourage you to do that. So I thought one little treat would be to share the first weaving that I ever made, because I think it's like really important to remember that we all just like start somewhere. Like, so much of making is just about fumbling through and then like continuing to fumble until you're like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing a little bit. So I started weaving about got to be like 6 years ago at this point. So this is the first piece. It's a little bit funky, you know, I'm still really proud of it and I like it and I've saved it. But you know, it's a little weird. And I think when you like start weaving, the things you make will be a little bit weird. And I just like really want you to embrace that. And so that's a beginning piece. And then this is an example of a piece that is in the marketplace, has been purchased, but I've held on to it just so that you can see a little bit of kind of where I've come and things that I'm still kind of exploring in my like textures and mark making.
Avery, on the note of talking about, you know, your first weaving, we did have a question from someone's asking about how does a beginning weaver get past the daunting, time-consuming task of warping even a small loom? So I don't know if you want to talk about that now, or if you want to save that for later. I just thought, since you were talking about the beginning stages of your career, maybe it'd be a good time.
I thought maybe we would start even just at like choosing a loom or making a loom. So I'm gonna just flip down. So I hope this is still in focus for everyone. You can kind of see like my workspace. I would say my favorite loom that I got pretty early on was this Becca loom. And it comes in these parts. So this is like the top and the bottom piece of the loom. It's wood and then some sort of like plastic piece here. And then we've got just regular wooden dowels. They come with the loom, but I also have broken many of them, and you can just go to your local hardware store, get a new one. If you go somewhere small and local, they won't cut them down for you. So it's very simple. How it works is you really just put these dowels in here like this. And there you've got your loom. So it's really good for anybody who travels, who will have to move, who wants something relatively inexpensive, made locally, made in the US. So this is it. So this is the beginning part of it. And then the next phase is warping it. But I would say that my actual very, very first loom was something that I made. And so I wanted to share like really just how you might get started with really a little bit of money. So I have just like a wood panel that I would use for painting because this is what I have in my studio, but you could use something much lower fidelity than this. So the way this wood panel is constructed is basically the same as a picture frame. You've got these like 4 pieces of wood put together. If you just wanted to use a picture frame, you would just have something that didn't have this kind of plywood birch panel that's in the front. And all you need is a ruler, basic, simple, school days, a pencil, and you would just go and make probably 1/2 inch kind of marks across both sides. So you just go and do that here, you do that here. And then you could use any type of kind of nail that you might have around. I just had this in my studio. They're from a hardware store. I think they're brass and steel, relatively inexpensive. And for every mark, you would just like nail this in with your regular hammer. This is from a nice little IKEA kit. You can get a hammer anywhere though. And you would just do that across, and then you have a loom. So you essentially have the same as what you have here, but you've just made it yourself with, less money and still really good quality. So I would just say like, start super simple. Don't invest or spend a ton of money until you figure it out that you are really interested in that. And I would just recommend that for any type of material practice. Don't put the pressure of having to spend hundreds of dollars and then be like, I don't know if it's for me. So then I would say in terms of warping, it's kind of boring for me, but it is a little bit a part of the meditation of weaving. So you can really use anything, but I have really been interested in this twine that is available at your hardware store, online. You could also use any type of like cotton material like this. This is also probably at any kind of, could be at a corner store. And then you can also play around too. I've got this kind of like shiny rope that I found. And there's really no need to spend much on this and just play and have fun and experiment. So I would say from an attention perspective, put on a podcast or an audiobook, chat with your friend or partner, like set up a FaceTime, like you can do a lot while you're doing this. But essentially it's a very like repetitive, slow process of just kind of going back and forth and figuring out what's the right amount of tension that you want to have. So warping is just continuing and going back and forth and getting the tension right for your project. And I think sometimes I like to do the work in big batches and I do a bunch at once. So here's just an example of the same loom, a little bit bigger, that's already been prepped for a project. And I'll sometimes do 4 or 5 at once. And this just helps me get over some of the barriers that I encounter when I lose focus on various projects. So I hope that answered the question for kind of like getting over that initial hump in your project.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems so meditative, like you said, to kind of do that prep work. I could see why you'd want to do everything together so that you don't have an excuse to not start the weaving process, right?
Exactly. And I think like once you kind of get over that hump, then for me, it starts to get really exciting because then I'm thinking about like, what materials am I going to use? Like, and that's where I get really jazzed and like excited about weaving, because I think of it a little bit as like painting. Like you're painting with wool, you're painting with materials, you're painting with an old balloon, which is one material that I've been playing with a lot and I'm really excited by. That's just like a mylar material of those balloons that have been really popular for like birthdays. Like they'll have letters and numbers, and my good friend Elaine, you know, snagged that at the end of a birthday party, and she was like, I think you can do cool things with this. And she was right. So really, like whatever is around, just like take advantage of it. I would say buy as little as possible, and just try to like kind of look for what's around. I love like a chunkier type of yarn or wool. This is roving. And so it's like it's bigger, it's a little, it's not as finely spun as like, you know, this is a Malabrigo brand of yarn, which is very beautiful, dyed. It's amazing. But totally, they all have like different feels and textures, and you can really manipulate them in different ways. This is a cotton. I was traveling in India and went to a factory where they were working in like traditional floor looms, and they had just all these scraps in the corner. And I said, hey, can I like buy a bunch of these? Because I have a vision for it. And so I just bought a bunch and have been using them ever since, because something about the color and the texture really spoke to me. And then I recently just got this package in the mail from a company called Black Cotton that Julius Tillery runs. You can check him out on Instagram. And he has been, you can buy cotton just right, you know, with even the dirt and the bits of cotton as it is harvested. And I'm really interested in what I can do with this. So this is just like another example of being really curious and looking for something that's going to be raw and weird and can result in something that will be very visually delightful.
What's the wildest material you've used with weaving?
Well, I have a semi-abandoned project, which may be a little bit interesting, because I like to let people know that like not everything works out very well. But I was kind of working with like some plastic bags and wool, because right at the beginning of kind of shut down and shelter in place, like a lot of grocery stores weren't letting us use the reusable bags. And I don't like to throw anything away that could maybe be transformed in some way. So I thought about incorporating that in to the piece. You know, I haven't totally abandoned it, but it's kind of on pause. But I'm just trying to figure out how can I transform these plastic bags to something better than what they are. And then I'll also grab this other little project that I'm working on that is back to the balloons, but I worked with a design studio called Synecdoche in Ann Arbor, and they gave me this scrap of wood from a beautiful project they were creating. So just like I showed before, I turned this into a loom by adding these nails along the top and bottom, and then warped that. And then I've been using this balloon and kind of playing with dimensionality and seeing if I can let stuff pop, and thinking about what if this weaving just stays on this loom and it becomes a bit of sculpture. So this is kind of my play of the week. I think I try to like incorporate and continue to encourage play even when I feel a little like swamped by paperwork or emails or invoices. But I think it's really important to find something that's really exciting and different and new.
Blowing our mind, Avery. This is absolutely amazing. One of my favorite questions, of course, like on the early like set of questions that people submitted was, what makes Avery so cool? And I'm like, no, she knows how to like grab amazing materials. Look at this work. This is crazy. And I added Julius's link here to his work, Black Cotton. I just love it. The flyest cotton and decor and accessory game, which is great. It's amazing. It's really great. Thanks for drawing our attention to that source material too. And like you're hyper aware of that as you embed and work with that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. Yeah, I just try to stay cool, you know. Another thing I thought I would share is just some of the reading that I'm doing right now, or the books that like excite me and are a good reference material. just because I'm always looking. And I think one good way to learn and how you're like figuring out your voice as an artist is to look at other artists and see what kind of like you respond to. So I've got this Sheila Hicks book. It'll be backwards for you all. But I just have always been so inspired by Sheila's work. I think like I like that she works at a small scale and at a big scale, but I think when you're starting early out, it's really nice to see how artists are working on a loom that you could have in your studio with materials that are available to you in your everyday. And so I think this book just catalogs so much of her smaller works, which are just a great starting point to think about color and composition, texture, layering, titling, and just like getting a sense of what is possible. And I think once you start to understand what other people are capable of, you start to ask questions of like, well, how might I get to that space? Like, how might I, attempt something different? Like, could I use these rubber bands that I get from the grocery store to transform them into something like this? Yes, totally. You can do it. So this is just like one example of a type of reading. And I don't know if this book is still available, but I would definitely say go on Pinterest and start to tag some of Sheila's work if you're curious about starting out.
Appreciate that, Avery. I put a link in there in our chat room too. We have a large collection and an archive of many makers who've made a big impact in this world. And one of those, of course, Sheila Hicks. So I just put a link to the digital archives that we have on our ACC site. And that would be a lovely thing to mine with you someday. Just always looking at possibilities and connections here. This is really great. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would say also like, I love Howardina Pindell's work. I don't think that she identifies as a textile artist, but she does work on canvas, which is after all a textile. Like I think sometimes people want to forget that, but I think that she's one of the artists who have really inspired me. And I think a lot about like her use of color. And I think we can explore color theory in so many different places and different artists. So I would really definitely recommend that people kind of examine her work and get to some of her color. But this is a great catalog of everything and all the types of work that she makes. So just another example of people to check out, look at.
This is great. I'm feeding, of course, all this content here. You're just like calling off so many amazing people and human beings who've inspired you.
Well, keep you typing fast. But I would also just say, Jason Logan has this also awesome book called Make Ink. And I haven't experimented with dyeing any materials, but I think that, it helps me think a lot about like being a conscious consumer of different pigments and ink, and always considering, is there a way that I could do this with a lower environmental impact? And since I work, with not only textiles, but paper and acrylic and all of that, there's always opportunities to challenge ourselves and think about how color is naturally occurring in the world and the ways that we can kind of create it with things in our kitchen, and just to reduce the impact of what enters our water streams. So this is another book that I often reference to really think, like, how could I get a little bit closer to what's available to me naturally?
Avery, I know that obviously everyone knows that weaving isn't the only medium you work with. So I was wondering, we had some questions that were submitted early on about kind of your interdisciplinary approach to work and creativity. So I was wondering if you could expand on that. And someone is asking what we can learn from your interdisciplinary approach to creativity.
Yeah, well, let me pull a few things that are like studio work that I was just doing yesterday. It could be kind of interesting to look at. I do think that these are some wood panel paintings that I've been working on. And I think they're all really connected. I also pulled this like tiny weaving that I made a long time ago to start to think about like, I think how I think about like shape and texture and how things interact, like they all really connect and come together for me. I think sometimes people think, oh, like what would a textile object have to do with something on wood panel? But for me, there's just so much interplay between them. I've also been doing a lot of collage work. So kind of just like included some pieces that are part of the collages that I piece. And I think of them as really very much like in conversation and alive in those similar ways. So I kind of work, I've kind of got like different modules of work that I do. Like I have a corner where I'll do some painting projects, and I have a corner where I will do some woven projects. And I think I'll spend a couple weeks doing something, and then I'll jump into something completely different, and I'll take a mark that I've been kind of getting comfortable with in one space and then take it into the collage space and then think like, well, how could that work in a weaving space? How do I achieve the same type of texture or movement when I'm not having like a paintbrush or a pencil or a marker of any type? Or how do I achieve like this metallic texture and energy with just a colored pencil, or on something that is not as dimensional, doesn't have as many indentations and ways to move around. So I think it introduces or it encourages me to keep experimenting with texture. And it keeps it fun, keeps me excited. I don't really have a dull day in the studio when I'm able to do so many different things. And I don't think there's any way I can pull the camera to show this, but I have these large wooden cubes that are like 24 inches by 24 inches. So I'm starting to think about painting on objects and playing with sculpture a little bit more. So that's kind of next for a project for me. And also just like making my own looms and like experimenting with what shape that can be. So that's kind of what's on my mind right now and what I'm trying to push and challenge myself to do.
Avery, maybe you could speak to kind of your journey to how you got to this point too. Where did you pick up textiles? At what age? What space? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say that I came from a family that encouraged like material practice and making art. So it was never like a foreign activity for me. But I studied photography and 2D work as an undergraduate. And then at the time that I graduated, I moved home and I was looking for jobs and kind of like in that despair phase of feeling like, oh, I don't know if I'll ever be an adult. And I think that was a time where I was like, okay, I've got some time. Let me explore textiles. Let me think about weaving. And so I started looking on YouTube and Instagram, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I think I just played around for a while and experimented and shared what I was doing on Instagram and connected with other people on Instagram who were doing similar work. So in a lot of ways, social media was kind of like an archive for me to get started, but a real living, breathing one, which is really exciting. And yeah, and then I just continue to do a lot of different stuff simultaneously with weaving. Sometimes I take a break for like a couple months and then I go deep into it. So it's always there for me, even though sometimes I kind of like, oh, I'm done with this. I'm never done with it.
Well, I mean, I'm super into that. I just love how you mine, you in your bio, your artist bio, you're mining, you say you're mining black narratives, women narratives of female Black artists. And it's pretty incredible, both online and I didn't, you reference archives, and I'm just curious if you had a chance to play in physical archives as well as the digital sphere. But I love how you're breaking both those boundaries down, but I'd love to know about what experiences of what's the same and different about those spaces and those archives.
Yeah, I definitely have spent time in physical archives and I love those. And I think when it's available to me, when I can go out and go, like usually in their basements of libraries or like places that people don't hang out so much, I do that. But I also think in this moment we're on our computers and phones, like the term archive is like so expansive. I think sometimes we think of it as like paper and 2D and material, but in the digital world, Pinterest is an archive, Instagram is an archive. our phones are archives. Like we take notes on them, we take photos, all of our, our data is logged in specific ways. So I think I'm most excited about makers being in control of their own archives too, and creating them and documenting what's valuable to them in their own terms. And I think like just owning your own archive and shaping that is really important. And so I think when it comes to the practice, like I take so many photos of what I'm doing in my work, and it's just for me to know, like, what did I do well? When did I go too far on a painting when I should have stopped one day ago? It all helps me understand my creative practice and my growth too. Like I like to go back and see what I was making 3 years ago and say, oh my gosh, I really couldn't get over the hump of a certain size or scale of something. And then I got there. So I think that we should embrace the archive and have control over it too, and just be thoughtful about what we would like to leave for future folks about what we're experimenting with or understanding, going through, coping with.
I so appreciate that. I'm going to channel my colleague Beth, who's our librarian and archivist at the American Craft Council, as we experience and we're looking for other ways to archive live material, right? Because there's technologies that can capture actual screenshots, and one day we'll be able to go back to these incredible resources and troves that have been built by, managed by, and used by the actual artists themselves, which gives you so much more awareness and depth into understanding what the story is behind all of that. So really appreciate that, and really appreciate you putting your work out there and jumping and sharing into others' works as well. That's pretty incredible. One quick question here. I mean, do you have anything new you've started? And because this question that we got on from here says, what's going on in your mind when you start thinking about a new weaving project? And maybe perhaps the best thing would be if there's something new you can share or be willing to share with us and how you got there.
Yeah. I'll share something that's still on the loom. Let me flip around, move some stuff out of the way. Yeah, so this is a project that's still on the loom. It's kind of in the style of one piece that was in the marketplace that has been sold, but this kind of red piece here where there's like some transparency. But I had been trying to source like a green color twine, or jute, which allows for a lot of friction and like texture so that you can actually have transparency, and it can like kind of hold different types of materials in a hardy way that won't fall apart when they come off the loom. And so I was able to find this Japanese jute and purchased it through String Harvest, which is a really great resource for purchasing ropes or weaving or macrame materials. So they're based in Australia. So this came from Japan by way of Australia. So quite a journey. But I'm interested in different colors and playing around with these transparencies and introducing bits of shininess to the work. But I'm also working out a bigger piece that I want to do. And I usually need to start by some material exploration at a small scale. So I'm hoping to build or purchase a loom that'll be 4 feet by 4 feet, which will be the biggest I've ever done. So I can't guarantee it'll be done in 2020, but I hope to start that work in 2020. So that's kind of some new work and how I'm thinking about a project. And a big theme has been like scaling up and what it takes to do that. I think some of it's like a head game, and then there's also a lot of logistics you have to figure out. But I think I learned the most when I like challenge myself to do something that's uncomfortable but not impossible.
Avery, we have a question from Natalia, and kind of about the elements of your work. She's saying that different elements of your work are more and less representative of figures and spaces. What makes you push forward these representations or take them away?
That's a good question, Natalia.
It is.
Well, let me grab one thing, bring it over. Some of my collage work, I've been like incorporating these figures that are, they come from actual photographs, usually from like my own archive. Sometimes they're in paper, sometimes they're in clay. Because I've been thinking a lot about the archive and wanting to incorporate that, but also thinking a lot about like care and consent and the use of people's like actual likeness and faces and like the ethics of that when they're no longer alive or I can't get in touch with them. And so I think for me, like I've been challenging myself to find these ways of representing the human figure without actually implicating any particular individual in the kind of fiction of the collages that I've been making and those narratives. And so that's like one way in which I think about bringing people in. I would love to include figures in everything I do. Like I would like these figures to be in weavings. I would like them to be in paintings and drawings and animations. I think the last leap is like, how do these figures get into woven materials? So I say like that's one of my like on my to-do list creatively to figure out how to make that aesthetically interesting and fun and playful. So the answer is I just want figures in everything. It's just a matter of how and technically and all of that. And also working on getting these up to human scale and like making me-size collages, me-size weavings, and you know, invite the viewer to see themselves as a participant in the material.
That's really incredible because it sort of speaks to this next question you just got here. Just the limitations of like of that we encounter right along the way as artists. But one quick question here is, how do you work your loom? Do you do it by hand with shuttles, scraps of yarn, all the above, music playlists? No, just kidding.
Yeah. I do have like a lot of different materials that actually like kind of support like shuttles and like always using a frame loom. I would say I usually like everything that I've gotten in my initial weaving kits has been really good materials. And then I go out and I look into the world and I'm like, how do I like, you know, go to the hardware store and make this bigger or modify it or make it to fit me better? Or like, what do I keep like banging into or dropping or breaking? And how do I like get that to be a little bit better? So these are like some of the actual like the materials that I like use for weaving in terms of like a needle. These are made of plastic. I have some wooden ones as well. So I'm always like on the lookout, you know, you don't always need like weaving specific materials, but you know, you could use a comb. This is a comb, you know, everything is something we know and like you can always find it in a bigger format, in a better format for you. So I just encourage people to always modify and never feel that what they receive in their initial kit is what they have to work with forever. I hope that answers something.
I think it answers it. Yeah. I mean, we also have a question from Diane. I think she's asking if there are any secrets to the sides not sucking in. I'm not like, yeah. So this, yeah. So the warping, yeah.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's fine. I don't know. I'll start with that. Like, I think interesting things can like be a byproduct of maybe what traditional artists or weavers would say is like incorrect form. But I think that if you can start to understand why something is happening through experimentation and do examples of the sides the way you want them, and then the sides maybe how you didn't think you want them, I think that's part of the creative process and practice. But I would say you don't always want your warp to be that tight. And sometimes you don't have to pull like as tight. Things can be a little bit looser. And I think I figured out over the time where we always think everything needs to be super taut and like your weaving can live with a little bit of looseness in it. And so that is probably something to just play with and try one weaving where you just change your habits a little bit and don't be too precious about trying something new. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, you learn something.
That's really cool. I feel like there's a lot of questions coming at you here, Avery, and I really appreciate again your time on a Sunday night to share all of this with us. You know, on a night of, you know, it seems like during even during COVID, right, and this pandemic and the stay-at-home orders, just finding time and space. And do you have any? You know, just curious if you had any health and wellness tips for everybody out there, and anything that you've been trying to practice as the world's changed in so many different ways, everything from, this health crisis to the social injustices we're seeing every day, to the environmental crisis that's just hitting us. Everything's collapsing at once. But as an artist, do you find what's your secret to that sauce and maintaining your strength and stamina?
Yeah, well, I would say at the top of the list, it's like drink water, hydrate often and always, get enough sleep. That's what my mom would say. So I would say for me, like, I wouldn't say I'm the best at balance, but I say like, I just like love making art. So I'm like kind of compulsively always making work because I'm really curious about it. And that works for me. But I think if that exhausts you, there's no need to go at the pace that I go at. But I just like wake up with 100 ideas. And so I'm kind of just like already out of the bed, like ready to work on stuff. But I think that checking in with your friends, making time for friendship and nurturing it is really important for just like mental well-being. And I would say collaborating with people is really important for me in terms of pacing and creativity, and like having other external influences that encourage like rest or challenge or comfort. All of that is really good. All of my collaborators and friends have really like kept me excited during quarantine and have suggested new things and have just kept art like always a fun, exciting thing. So I just think like doubling down on the relationships that are most important and nurturing to us, and helping people out. Like if you see something that you can offer to someone, whether or not if it's like money or any financial resource, but support or encouragement, just try to be really generous in saying how you feel about people and the help that they provide, and like all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would say those are my top things. And walk around, exercise, wear a mask.
Totally appreciate that. Absolutely. What's the scene like where you're at right now? I mean, you're in Ann Arbor, right? Out in Michigan.
Yeah.
Where do you find like a lot of creative communities there to connect with? And has that been different since all this work has come together? Have you seen like in the past like 5 months, right? What's changed about how you connect and where you connect with your creative circles?
Yeah, I would say that the creative circle has grown and gotten even deeper in this time. I think like just the push to doing things online or normalizing FaceTiming with someone that you maybe haven't met in real life before has been really good in terms of just saying like, okay, just because we can't get coffee, it doesn't mean that we're not in community. It doesn't mean that we're not friends. It doesn't mean that we're not going to influence each other's work. So one of my collaborators, Ricky Weaver, is based in Ypsilanti. We met right before, like probably in February, and then we like FaceTime almost every week, and we collaborate on projects. We're always in the Google Docs doing stuff, throwing stuff up in presentations, looking at our work side by side. And so I don't know if we would have done all of that if it hadn't been for the constraints of not being able to meet in person. Ricky's moved into the studio around here too, so I've recruited her to be even closer into the creative community. So I would just say sometimes, I think when I first moved to Ann Arbor, I struggled to find a creative community, but there are always creative people everywhere. I think sometimes we just have to change our approaches and be a little bit brave in terms of reaching out to people and expressing our desire, setting the intention of wanting to be in deeper community with other people.
Brilliant. Are you sharing a workspace right now? You said, is it a studio?
I have my own studio space, but there are other artists in the building.
Great.
We have some good safety protocols, or we just aren't always here at the same time. So that keeps it pretty safe. But it's really nice that we can just like put on a mask and go outside and bring something that we're working on, get a little bit of critique and feedback, share a supply or technique. So it's been really nice to be like side by side other people who are kind of struggling through the creative process and doing the same type of work, similar work.
That's really cool. I mean, you got fans again on this little chat room here. And so Diane's been asking, she almost skipped this session. She was like, I almost skipped this at the end of the day, but it's been great so far. So thank you. Avery, do you offer classes? She wants to know, are you teaching?
I do. I am wanting to do more teaching. I've done a little bit of one-on-one, which was awesome. I think my ideal type of teaching would be in person, but I am adjusting to, figuring out a way to do that digitally that is rewarding for me and for other, artists. And I feel like this nice little flip, I'm such a visual tactile learner. So I really wanted to figure out how I can show people what I'm doing with my hands from different angles. So I think that's been kind of a game changer. So I think now that I got this little flip situation, I am ready to teach. So if you go to my website or on Instagram, message me. We can figure something out. This was really
Let's throw that together, Lindsay. What do you think? I mean, this is amazing, Avery. I really appreciate that. It's been magical to watch, the way people have been connecting and sharing online, right? Just both, one, your archive and your inspiration and narratives that we're looking for to find inspiration as artists, but two, how we teach and share. Just surprisingly, I thought, well, okay, people are either going to get exhausted with this or they're not going to feel like they're connecting physically. But we did a series of workshops earlier in the week with the Museum of Craft and Design, and Ramakan led us through some really incredible group crochet jamming, and it was just that time alone, just that exploration, So we'd love to work with you in the future on something like that. I'm getting a couple more questions. One was, what was the name of the Sheila Hicks book? Was it just Sheila Hicks? Do you know who published it? Or I could type it in.
I think it's just Sheila Hicks.
Cool.
Yeah, it's BGC Yale. It may be hard to come by. I was on a wait list for a long time to get it, but it is a lovely book. And I would say the main things that I invest in these days or spend my money are on books, because I love to be able to look at work in person and support the makers of books too, because, when we're on Pinterest, we're not really supporting the editing process and the photographing and all of that. And as artists, I think it's important that we, buy some things that other artists make.
I so support that. And of course, at the Craft Council, there's two arms to our work, we feel like, and part of it is that publishing, right? We have we publish the national magazine every year, and we have a great editorial team, and watching what stories are selected and how they're working together with the artist to tell those stories, and everything then to doing projects like this. We're at the marketplace, we're trying to find avenues to support artists' livelihood. And if you bring those two worlds together, so one, thank you, Avery, for bringing that together in this presentation. That's been really cool. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is good. Yeah. I got a quick funny question about my background, right? What's the picture in your background? Maybe it's that, maybe that's the Ramacam piece that you're referring to. But anyways, I'm broadcasting in from St. Paul, Minnesota. So it's been great to see these faces, where we're coming in and out of. Actually, somebody asked you about your pillows earlier on in this session here. Avery.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I bought this little day bed off of Facebook Marketplace for $50, which I think was kind of a steal. So I don't know the history, but they came to me by way of somebody else in Ypsilanti, and so it's awesome. But I love fabric. I don't know how to sew, but I would love to learn, because I have aspirations for different types of textiles. So these kind of caught my eye as, a project of something I could make in different fabrics.
Avery, someone was asking for your website, and I just plunked it into the chat, but I just want to make sure it's the right one. Is it averywilliamson.com? Perfect.
Yes.
Super. Well, if anybody else has any questions, and we have a few more minutes left with Avery, if somebody wants to land something in the chat room, or feel free to join the conversation, take yourself off mute. These have been really great, Avery. I mean, the maker meetups, Lindsay, thank you for putting them together. Avery, for joining. It's just one way that without doing these kinds of projects in person, at a particular show, which, we're really missing right now. It just gives us a chance to sort of walk into space together, whether it's virtual, but it feels real, right? And I really appreciate you got what makes you so cool, right? You got a good vibe, you got good energy, you got good stories, you got good technique. This has been really awesome, and we're really indebted to have you share all this time with us. So anything else? I mean, I know, right? Look at that ethics of archiving. Boy, I mean, there's so much going on, Avery, in your work, and it's going to take us a while to digest that, I think, but we'd love to circle back and work with you. Maybe one last question, because this is a good place to end. Sure. Tamara, beautiful question. Love that, because we started our conversation today with that. We were like, we were flipping out on your flip, right? Like what's the 2020 tool of the year? What, it's a good tip for makers out there who are exploring this online learning. I just love this tool, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just got this online. It's basically like if you've ever used like a clamp light, it's essentially that, but it just has a part for your phone and a little kind of mechanism that allows you to like kind of move your camera side to side, like up and down, which has been so good. I started with a selfie stick. Sorry, a little embarrassing to say, but they're actually great. So don't hate on the selfie stick. But I used that for touring around my studio for some previous events, but it kind of hurt my hands. So this seemed like a great option. And I'm really excited to like shoot more demos and be able to kind of just, give a more tactile experience. Because again, I learned so much by like touching and feeling things. And this format, you looking through a thing at me is just like not really the way that we learn. And I really feel that like, this is how you start to feel and see and understand how things come together. So I just wanted to think about how I could make this experience visually good for you all and not shaky, and just trying to adjust to digital life and make it not painful. So I'm glad
it wasn't painful at all. You've been amazing. Well, great job, everybody. Again, thanks for joining us for the Makers Meetups. Lindsay, did you want to wrap up anything or?
No, Avery, it was just wonderful having you. And thanks so much for showing us the process and your studio and everything. And good luck with all your future creative endeavors. I'm excited to see where your work goes in the future and working with you hopefully again.
We'll be in touch for sure, Avery.
Thank you all. This has been great. I'm so appreciative of your time, and I hope you learned something, and hope it was chill, and I hope you can do relaxing stuff for the rest of your Sunday.
Yes, happy Sunday to everyone.
Cheerio, everybody.
Bye everyone.